The morning of the wedding, I woke up at 5 o'clock. I couldn't sleep anymore. My stomach was churning with this mixture of excitement and anxiety that I couldn't quite explain, but I know now what it was. It was a warning. My body was trying to tell me something that my heart refused to hear. I had spent the last 3 months preparing for this day. I had taken my dress to the cleaners twice because I wanted it to be perfect, because I wanted the fabric to have that fresh, expensive smell that comes from professional care. I had bought new shoes, new earrings, a new handbag, all on a credit card that I was slowly paying off. I had gotten my hair done at the expensive salon instead of the place around the corner where they always rush through my appointments. The woman at the expensive salon took an hour and a half on my hair, washing it with some kind of special oil, conditioning it, curling each section carefully, asking me questions about the wedding, about my son, about how excited I must be. I told her how happy I was, how special this day was going to be, how much it meant to me to be there. She smiled at me in the mirror and said, "You must be so proud." And I said, I am. I am so proud. I did all of this because I wanted to look good for my son's wedding, because I wanted him to be proud of me, because I wanted to finally feel like I was part of something beautiful and important in his life. I arrived at the venue at 1 o'clock. The ceremony wasn't until 3, but I came early because I wanted to help, because I wanted to be useful, because that's what mothers do. That's what I had always done. I walked through the heavy wooden doors of the chapel, and my eyes scanned the rows of white chairs. I was looking for my name. The seating arrangements were printed on little cards at each chair, and I was walking down the aisle, checking chairs, row after row. Front row, back row, middle section, side section, 189 chairs. I counted them without meaning to later, when I realized what had happened. 189 chairs, and not a single one had my name on it. My heart started beating faster. Maybe I was in the wrong section. Maybe they had put me somewhere special, somewhere important. Maybe they had a surprise for me. I kept looking, kept walking, kept hoping. But there was nothing. No card with my name, no special place reserved for the mother of the groom. Nothing at all. I found my daughter-in-law, Sarah, standing in the back of the chapel with her clipboard, directing people where to sit. She was wearing her wedding dress, and she looked beautiful. There was no denying that. But when she saw me, her expression changed. It was like watching a light bulb flicker and go dark. "Oh," she said, her voice bright and artificial. "You're here already." "Yes," I said carefully. I wanted to help set up, but also I was looking for my seat. "My seat?" She laughed, and it was the kind of laugh that had a sharp edge to it. "Right. Yes, about that. We actually didn't account for you in the seating chart. We made it when we thought it would be a very small wedding, just immediate family, and then things kind of spiraled. So many people to invite, you know how it is." I stood there looking at her, feeling something cold start to crystallize in my chest. I had given her $30,000 toward this wedding. I had helped her choose the flowers, the colors, the menu. I had driven her to 3 different venues before she decided on this one. I had sat on the phone with caterers and listened to her complaints about everything from the appetizers to the way the napkins were folded. I had given her my time, my energy, my money, my attention, and she didn't have a seat for me. "Don't worry, though," she said, continuing in that same bright voice. "We found you a spot." She pointed toward the back of the chapel, near the restroom doors, where a single folding table and chair sat, facing away from the altar, positioned in a way that made it clear I wasn't supposed to be part of the actual ceremony, the actual moment, the actual celebration. "You can sit there," she continued cheerfully. "It's a nice quiet spot. You can see everyone without being seen." When she said that last part, I felt something die inside me. That's what I had been my whole life, I realized. I had been the person who watched without being seen. I had been the person in the background, the person who made things possible without getting to be part of them. I had been invisible, and somehow I had accepted that, had even embraced it, thinking that was what a good mother did. I thought about my husband. He had passed away 15 years ago, and he was the kind of man who would have made a fuss about this, who would have stood up and said something right then and there. He would have been angry. He would have demanded respect. But I wasn't angry. Not in that moment. I was something worse than angry. I was numb. I was hollow. I was finally seeing something that had been true all along, and it was taking all my strength not to fall apart right there in that chapel. Because the thing is, I had always helped them. Always. When my son David was in college, I paid his tuition, all 4 years of it, even though it meant I had to refinance my mortgage. When he graduated, I helped him put a down payment on his first apartment. Money that I had been saving for a vacation that never happened. When he got engaged to Sarah, I threw them an engagement party that cost $5,000. When they got married, I paid for the wedding. But before all of that, before any of that, I had raised him alone after my husband died. I had worked 2 jobs, one during the day at the accounting firm doing other people's numbers, and one at night doing freelance bookkeeping from home, falling asleep at my desk at 2 a.m. with my cheek pressed against the keyboard. I had skipped lunches to buy him new shoes when he grew out of the old ones. I had stayed up nights helping him with his homework, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee that I reheated 6 times because I was too tired to finish it. The coffee becoming bitter and cold and unsatisfying, just like my life was becoming. I had missed so many things in my own life because I was too busy being present in his. I had missed dates with men who might have cared about me. I had missed opportunities for promotions at work because I couldn't work extra hours. I had missed my own life, basically. And I had done it willingly because I wanted him to have a good one. I had postponed my own dreams, my own relationships, my own happiness, all because I believed that was what being a mother meant. And now, looking at that folding chair near the bathroom, I realized that I had been wrong about everything. I had given him everything because I wanted him to feel loved. And this folding chair was how he repaid that love. I did something then that surprised me. I turned around and I walked out of that chapel. I didn't make a scene. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't tell Sarah what I thought of her or her wedding. I simply closed my eyes for a moment, took a breath, and I left. I drove home with my new dress on, my new shoes on my feet, my new earrings catching the light as I gripped the steering wheel. And as I drove, something happened inside me. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't anger. It was clarity. It was like someone had suddenly turned on all the lights in a dark room, and I could finally see the shape of everything that had been happening around me for years. I could see every time I had said yes when I wanted to say no. Every time I had given when I couldn't afford to give. Every time I had bent myself into a pretzel, trying to make them happy, trying to earn their love, trying to prove that I was worthy of being called their mother, their mother-in-law, their family. I could see it all, and it was overwhelming. When I got home, I sat at my kitchen table and I made a list. I wrote down every financial gift I had given them, every wire transfer, every check, every time I had taken cash out of my savings account. I wrote down the college tuition, the apartment deposit, the wedding expenses, the car loan I had co-signed. I wrote down the smaller things too. The groceries I had bought them, the dinners I had cooked, the money I had given them when they said they were short on rent, or when Sarah wanted to go on vacation, or when David needed a new suit for a work event. David's college tuition was $25,000. The apartment deposit was $12,000. The engagement party was $5,000. The wedding was $18,000. But those were just the big things. The accumulated smaller amounts, the cash withdrawals, the checks I wrote out without even counting them anymore, all of that added up to something that made my head spin when I tried to calculate it. By the time I was finished, I had written down a number that made me feel sick. $87,000. $87,000. That's how much I had given them over the course of 15 years. $87,000 that came from my pension, my retirement savings, the money my husband had left for me to live on in my old age. The money that was supposed to help me through my later years when I wouldn't be able to work anymore. And now, I was supposed to sit at a folding table near a bathroom and pretend like I was grateful for the opportunity to be there at all. I was supposed to smile and pretend that this was fine, that I didn't mind being forgotten, that my feelings didn't matter, that what I had given them was expected and required and not worth acknowledging. That was the moment I decided that things were going to change. I picked up the phone and I called the bank. I spoke to my financial advisor, a woman named Margaret who had been managing my accounts for a decade. I told her that I wanted to stop all automatic transfers I had set up for my son. I wanted to close joint accounts. I wanted to protect what was left of my money. Margaret was surprised. I could hear it in her voice, and she asked me if everything was okay, if there had been a problem, if I was sure about this decision. I told her that yes, I was sure, that I had never been more sure about anything in my life. Margaret didn't argue with me. She just did what I asked. Then I called a lawyer. I told her about the wedding, about being sat at a folding table like I was an afterthought, like I was someone's elderly relative who had to be accommodated but not really welcomed. I told her about the money, all $87,000 of it, and about how I was worried that my son and his wife might try to take advantage of my financial situation, that they might try to convince me to give them more, that they might try to manipulate me into thinking I was being unreasonable or ungrateful. The lawyer told me I needed to protect myself. She told me to document everything, every gift, every transfer, every conversation. So I started going through boxes of old documents. I found bank statements from the last 20 years. I found receipts for gifts and plane tickets. I found emails and text messages where Sarah had asked me for money, where she had made it sound like it was urgent, like it was important, like I would be a terrible person if I didn't help them immediately. I collected all of it and I put it in a folder that I kept on my kitchen table where I could see it every day, where I could touch it and remind myself that I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't making this up, that there was real evidence of what they had done to me. 3 hours after I left the chapel, my phone started ringing. It was David. He wanted to know where I was, why I wasn't at the wedding, what was wrong. His voice was confused and a little annoyed, like I had done something to inconvenience him. I thought about lying to him, about making up some excuse, about pretending I had car trouble or a headache. But I was tired of lying. I was tired of pretending. So I told him the truth. I told him that I had come to the chapel, that I had looked for my name on every single chair, that I hadn't found it, and that when his wife showed me where I was supposed to sit, I realized that I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't be invisible. I couldn't accept a folding chair at my own son's wedding. There was silence on the other end of the line. Then he said something that I will never forget. He said, "Mom, don't be dramatic. It's just a seat. Just a seat." Like it didn't matter. Like I didn't matter. Like everything I had done for him could be summed up in the price of a catered dinner and a reception hall. I hung up the phone. I didn't yell at him. I didn't give him an ultimatum. I just hung up. And then I did something that changed everything. I sat at my kitchen table for about an hour just sitting there, staring at nothing. My hair was still curled from the salon. My nails were still painted a soft champagne color. I was still wearing the new dress that I had saved for months to buy, the dress I thought I would look beautiful in while my son got married. But now I felt ridiculous. I felt stupid. I felt like I had been playing a part in a play and everyone else knew it was a performance except me. I thought I was the lead character, but I was really just an extra, someone to be moved around as needed and forgotten when convenient. A prop. That's what I had been. A very expensive prop. That's when I made the decision. It wasn't an angry decision. It was cold and clear and calculated. I was going to take back control of my life. I was going to stop being a supporting actress in everyone else's drama. I was going to make them understand, even if they never knew it was me, that there were consequences for treating people the way they had treated me. I picked up my phone and I called the caterer who was supposed to provide the food for David's wedding. The caterer picked up on the third ring, and I could hear the sounds of a busy kitchen in the background, people shouting, pans clanging. I told her who I was, and I explained the situation in a calm, professional voice. I said, "I understand that you're already working the event, but I need you to do me a favor. I need you to make something go wrong. Nothing dangerous, nothing illegal, nothing that would hurt anyone. Just something that causes a significant problem, something that will disrupt their carefully planned day. I need the main course to arrive late. I need it to arrive at least 90 minutes late. I said, I will pay you double your usual fee if you can make this happen. There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could hear the caterer breathing, thinking about what I was asking, thinking about whether this was crazy or if it made sense. Finally, she said, Mrs. Chen, I don't usually do things like this, but I've been in the food business for 23 years, and I've seen a lot of families come through. I've seen mothers treated like garbage by their own children. I've seen daughters-in-law who act like queens while their mothers-in-law pay for everything. I'll do it. I'll make sure the food is delayed. I'll find a reason that's legitimate, something mechanical, something that no one can blame me for. I hung up, and I felt something shift inside me. For so long, I had been the person who made things happen, who took care of everything, who solved everyone's problems and bent over backwards to accommodate their needs. But this time, I was the one creating a problem. This time, I was the one putting something in motion that I couldn't control. And it felt good. It felt like power. It felt like I was finally taking something back that belonged to me, which was my own life and my own choices and my own right to make decisions that affected my own happiness. I changed out of my wedding dress. I put on comfortable clothes, jeans, and a soft sweater that smelled like me instead of like fancy cleaning chemicals. I washed the makeup off my face. I let my hair down and ran my fingers through it, destroying the careful curls that the stylist had spent an hour creating, undoing the work that had been done to make me beautiful for their wedding. I sat on my couch and I waited. I waited to see what would happen. I waited to see if anyone would call and apologize. If anyone would realize what they had done to me. I waited to see if my son would finally understand that his mother was a person, not just a bottomless resource that he could take from whenever he needed something. The minutes ticked by. I ordered Chinese food to my house, the good kind from the expensive restaurant that I usually couldn't afford because my money was being spent on them. I poured myself a glass of wine, the kind that cost more than $30 a bottle, the kind that had always seemed like an indulgence I couldn't justify. I sat on my couch with my legs up and I let myself relax for the first time in years. I let myself feel what it was like to not be worried, to not be thinking about their problems, to just be present in my own life and my own moment. Then, at around 7 o'clock in the evening, my phone started ringing and vibrating on my coffee table like it was possessed. It was David. It was Sarah. It was David's best man. It was Sarah's mother. It was people I didn't even recognize, just numbers calling me back to back to back to back. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. I watched the screen light up over and over again. I watched my name appearing next to their numbers. I watched them desperately trying to reach me. And I didn't feel bad. I felt relieved. I turned the phone off. I literally turned it off and put it in a drawer in my bedroom so I couldn't hear it anymore. I finished my wine. I had another glass. I watched television, something mindless and soothing that didn't require any thought. I let myself drift into something that felt almost like peace, even though I knew that peace was temporary, that everything was about to explode. At 9 o'clock, there was a loud pounding on my front door. I didn't answer it. I just sat on my couch and I listened to the pounding. Eventually, it stopped. I assumed David had given up and gone back to his wedding. But he hadn't. He had just gone back to dealing with a crisis that was happening at the reception hall right now. A crisis that was making his entire wedding day a nightmare. And he didn't understand why. He didn't know that I had orchestrated it. He just thought he was unlucky. He just thought the world had conspired against him. The wedding that had been planned for months, that had cost more money than I could count, that was supposed to be the perfect day that would showcase Sarah's beauty and David's love and his good taste and his success, was falling apart. The caterer didn't arrive with the food at the scheduled time. 1 hour late, then 2. And as the guests sat at their tables with empty plates and their champagne getting warm in their glasses, they started to get restless. They started to complain. The aunt in the blue dress made a comment about wondering if they had catered from a restaurant an hour away. The boss that David worked for checked his watch for the fourth time. The expensive photographer stood around taking pictures of increasingly unhappy faces. The speeches had to be delayed. The dancing had to be postponed. The whole careful choreography of the day unraveled because of something as simple as food not showing up on time. I didn't feel guilty about it, not even a little bit. I felt something else, something that I didn't have a name for. I felt like I had finally done something real, something with real consequences, something that actually mattered in a tangible way. I felt like, for once in my life, I had taken my power back from people who had been taking from me for so long. I felt like I had sent a message, even if no one knew it was from me. And even though it was just a delayed caterer, even though it was just a disrupted wedding, it represented something bigger to me. It represented the moment when I stopped being invisible, when I stopped accepting the folding chair, when I stopped being the person who makes things happen for everyone else while sitting in the background. It represented my choice. It represented my power. It represented the beginning of the rest of my life. The thing is, nobody could prove it was me. The caterer had been honest when she said there was a mechanical issue. It was legitimate, unfortunate, bad luck as far as everyone was concerned. But I knew my power had worked. The universe had aligned to prove my point. Messages started flooding in from every platform. Texts from David becoming increasingly desperate, one at midnight. "Mom, please call me. It's a disaster here. People are leaving." Another at 1 in the morning. "Where are you? We called the caterer a dozen times. Is this something you did?" And then one from Sarah at 1:45. "Where is my mother? We paid good money for this event, and it is ruined." And then at 3 in the morning, David's tone shifted completely. "Mom, I'm sorry about the seat. I was wrong. I know I was wrong. Can you please just come back? Sarah's in the bathroom crying. My boss left. I need you. Please call me back." But I didn't respond. For the first time in my life, their emergency wasn't mine to solve. I didn't fix their problem like I always had before. I turned my phone off completely and put it in my bedroom. I took a hot bath with expensive bath salts I had never allowed myself to buy. I read a book I had been meaning to read for years. I went to bed early and slept deeper than I had in years. The kind of sleep that comes from finally making a choice that aligns with your own survival instead of someone else's comfort. The next morning, I woke to David standing on my porch. He'd apparently driven all night. He was still in his wedding clothes, shirt half untucked, one button missing. His tie was loosened around his neck. There was a wildness in his eyes I had never seen before. Desperation that looked almost animal. When I opened the door, he pushed past me without greeting. His voice was loud and strained. "Do you understand what you did? The food didn't arrive until nearly 3 hours late. We had hundreds of people standing around with nothing to eat. My boss was there, Mom. He saw the whole thing fall apart. I looked like an idiot. The catering company blamed it on mechanical failure, but we both know you had something to do with this. I can feel it." I realized he still didn't understand. It wasn't about the food or the timing or his boss. It was about the fact that he didn't think I was worth a seat at the table. It was about the fact that he had hurt me and felt no remorse until his own comfort was affected. His entire life had been built on my sacrifice, and he treated that like something I owed him. I didn't yell back. Yelling just makes people defensive. I spoke calmly instead. "I didn't do this. The universe did. Sometimes things fall apart, David. Sometimes bad things happen because you make choices that hurt people, and those people finally decide they're not going to absorb that hurt anymore." His face went red. He had expected me to apologize and fix everything like I always had before. But I had changed. I had become someone he didn't recognize and didn't know how to handle. Sarah called while he was still at my house, standing in my living room with his arms crossed, his body language aggressive and defensive. The phone rang and it was her. I could hear her voice screaming from the other end before I could even get the phone fully up to my ear. She was crying and furious at the same time, which was an interesting combination, rage and tears coming through the phone in equal measure. She screamed about how I had ruined her special day, how I had sabotaged them, how I was a selfish and cruel woman, how no mother-in-law would ever do what I had done to someone she supposedly loved. She talked about how she had been nice to me, how she had included me in her life, how she had treated me like family when she could have just ignored me. She said I was jealous of her youth and her beauty, and the fact that she was happy when I was just a bitter old woman sitting alone in my house with nothing but my regrets. David was listening to this through the speakerphone, and I could see his face getting harder, getting colder, like he was just beginning to understand the magnitude of what had happened, and his alliance was starting to slip toward his wife and away from me, which was exactly what I expected would happen. And I said something that I think shocked both of them, even though in that moment I was surprised at how calm I sounded, how certain. I said, "Sarah, I didn't do anything to you. You did this to yourself. You have everything you've ever asked for. You have a husband who adores you, or at least he did until today. You have money, at least for now, money that came out of my pocket and my savings for 15 years. You have all of my love and attention for the last 15 years, and the one thing you couldn't give me in return was basic human respect. Not even basic human consideration. Not even the small kindness of making sure I had a place at my own son's wedding. So yes, your wedding was ruined. Yes, your guests were uncomfortable. Yes, you had a terrible day, and I'm telling you this because I need you to hear it. Welcome to what it feels like to not always get what you want. Welcome to what it feels like when the universe doesn't revolve around you. Welcome to the real world, the actual real world, where things don't always go according to plan, and people don't always bend themselves into pretzels just to accommodate you and make you happy." There was silence on the other end of the line. Then she hung up. The dial tone came through the speakerphone, that hollow emptiness that you get when someone just disconnects. David looked at me like I had slapped him across the face, like I had physically struck him. His eyes were wide. His mouth was open. He said, "I don't know who you are anymore. I don't recognize you." And I said, "I know. That's exactly the point. I had to become someone different because the person I was before was disappearing, was being slowly consumed by the needs of other people until there was nothing left of me at all. The person I was before was a ghost, David, a woman who existed only in relation to what she could do for other people. And I couldn't do that anymore because if I did, there wouldn't be anything left of me at all. There would just be a shell, a husk of a human being going through the motions of living, but not actually living anything real." Oh, he left my house angry. He stormed out, his shoes pounding on my wood floors. I didn't try to stop him. I didn't follow him to the porch calling his name. I didn't offer to fix things or apologize or grovel. I let him leave, and I watched him get into his car, still wearing his tuxedo pants and his wrinkled shirt, and I closed the door behind him, and I locked the deadbolt, and I felt something settle inside me that felt like peace. Even though it was mixed with sadness, even though it was complicated and layered, and not at all the kind of peace that comes from winning something or achieving something good. It was the kind of peace that comes from finally making a choice that you know is right, even if that choice destroys something that you thought was supposed to last forever. The next visitor was Sarah's mother, who showed up at my door with that particular kind of fury that only an in-law can muster. Dressed to the nines in a designer outfit like she was coming to do battle. She told me that what I had done was unforgivable, that she had never seen behavior like this in her life, that I was a terrible person and a terrible mother and a terrible mother-in-law. She told me that I was a vindictive old woman who was jealous of Sarah's youth and beauty and success, and that I had deliberately sabotaged the wedding out of spite and jealousy. She told me that I had ruined her daughter's most important day, that I was the reason the food didn't arrive, that I obviously had done something to that caterer, that I was just a bitter old woman trying to destroy her daughter's happiness out of malice. And I let her talk because I had learned something important, which was that people like this, People who are driven entirely by the need to blame someone else for their problems will keep talking as long as you let them. They will talk until they run out of words, and then they will talk some more, repeating the same accusations over and over again with increasing volume and decreasing rationality. But none of what they say matters anymore because it doesn't change the fact that you have decided you matter. And that's the only thing the T matters now. That's the truth that changes everything. I had a friend who came to see me a few days later, a woman named Patricia, who I had met at the library book club a few months before. I had mentioned the situation to her in passing, just complained about it over tea and cookies in the library's meeting room, and she had listened with a kindness that felt almost foreign to me at that point. Patricia had listened quietly without trying to fix it or make me feel better. And when I finished telling her everything, she told me about her own daughter, about how she had given everything just like I had given everything, about how she had devoted her entire life to her daughter's happiness at the expense of her own, and how one day she finally stopped. She told me that the first few months were the hardest because everybody in the family was angry, absolutely furious. Everybody acted like she was the villain, like she had become a terrible person just by refusing to let herself be used anymore, just by deciding that her life mattered. But then things shifted, she said. Her daughter eventually realized that her mother was serious, that the money was truly gone, that she would have to figure out her own life, that she couldn't just keep coming back to the well expecting to find it full. And now, 5 years later, they actually had a real relationship based on something real, instead of on her mother's willingness to sacrifice everything. Patricia told me that I had done the right thing. She took my hands and she looked me right in the eye and she said, "You were brave." And when she said it, I cried. I cried for the first time in a way that felt clean and necessary. Not because I was sad, but because it was the first time in a very long time that anyone had told me I was brave for protecting myself, instead of telling me I was selfish for refusing to be used, instead of telling me I was cruel for setting boundaries. For years, my entire family had told me I was too much or not enough, too strict or too lenient, too involved or too distant. But Patricia looked at me and she saw someone who had made a hard choice in order to survive. And she called it what it was. She called it brave. I had done the math on my finances, something I probably should have done years earlier, but hadn't allowed myself to do because I think I knew on some level that if I actually saw the numbers written out, I would have to acknowledge what was happening. I called an accountant, a woman named Margaret who worked in the financial district downtown, and who listened to my situation with the kind of professional compassion that comes from seeing this over and over again. She told me that I needed to protect what I had left, that I was in a vulnerable position, that I needed to act quickly and decisively. She explained to me very carefully how financial abuse works in families, using words like coercive control and economic dependence and learned helplessness. She explained to me that what David and Sarah had been doing was actually illegal in some jurisdictions, that it constituted elder financial exploitation, that there were actually laws on the books designed to prevent exactly this kind of thing. She told me I had been smart to stop it when I did, that if I had let it continue much longer, I might have ended up with nothing at all, with no retirement savings, with no safety net of any kind, nothing to sustain me in my final years when I could no longer work. I looked at the documents she showed me. I looked at the 15 years of transfers laid out chronologically, the patterns that only became visible when they were all displayed like this. Transfers that started small, a couple thousand here and there, and that escalated year after year after year. The first few years they asked for 5,000, then 8,000, then 12,000. By the last year, they were asking for money constantly, every month, sometimes multiple times per month. I looked at the patterns of escalating requests, the way the amount of money they asked for had gone up every single year, like it was some kind of automatic inflation adjustment built into their sense of entitlement. Margaret showed me a graph, and the line just kept going up and up and up like a ski slope. If things had continued at that rate, I would have been completely broke by the time I was 70 years old. I would have had to move in with them, dependent on their generosity and their goodwill, or I would have had to move into some kind of assisted living facility that I couldn't afford, ending up in a state facility instead of the nice private place I had always imagined. This was the future I had been sleepwalking toward. This was the cliff I had been walking toward blindfolded. This was what I was unconsciously preventing when I made that call to the caterer and orchestrated that delayed food delivery. It wasn't really about revenge, or maybe it was partly about revenge, but it was really about survival. It was about finally recognizing that my life mattered, that my future mattered, that I deserved to have a life that was more than just servicing the needs of other people. I changed my will. I had a new one drawn up by a lawyer, a woman named Patricia who specialized in estate planning, and I looked her in the eye and I told her exactly what I wanted. I said, I want everything I have, every penny of it, to go to charity. I left nothing for David. I left nothing for Sarah. I left nothing for them to inherit and squabble over and fight about in probate court when I was gone. Instead, I set up a scholarship fund in my husband's name, a fund that would give money to kids from low-income families who wanted to go to college, kids who didn't have parents who could pay for their education, kids who had to figure it out on their own like I did. That fund was going to do actual good in the world, and every dollar in it would be a statement about what I valued and what I believed in. And when I told David what I had done, came to my house again after a week of silence, he couldn't believe it. His face was pale. His voice was shaking. He said, "You can't do that. We're your family. That's supposed to come to us. That's what we've been working for." And I said, "No, it's not. It's mine. And I get to decide what happens to it. I have worked my entire life for that money. I have earned every single penny of it through decades of work and sacrifice and putting other people's needs before my own. And I get to decide whether it goes to you or whether it goes to help kids who don't have anyone to help them. And I have decided it's going to go to help those kids instead." Something broke in him then. He sat down on my couch and he looked so much smaller than he had ever looked before. Like he had been deflated, like something essential inside him had collapsed, like a building being demolished. He said, "I didn't think you would actually go through with this. I thought you were bluffing. I thought you would cool down and come back and everything would go back to normal. I thought all of this was just temporary anger that you would get over." And I said, "I'm not bluffing, David. And nothing is going back to normal because I am not the same person I was before. The person I was before was drowning, and I finally came up for air. The person I am now is someone who knows the value of her own life, and I will never go back to the person I was." He left, and he didn't come back. Sarah sent a few more angry messages, but eventually she stopped when she realized that I wasn't responding, that I was never going to respond, that she had lost me forever. They moved to a smaller apartment because they couldn't afford the big one anymore. They had to both get jobs because there wasn't money flowing in from me anymore, and apparently that was something of a shock to their system, a reality check that they were completely unprepared for. I heard through mutual friends that they were struggling, that David was working in an office doing insurance adjustments or something equally uninspiring, and Sarah had taken a job at a retail store selling clothes. That maybe, just maybe, they were learning what it felt like to have to actually work for their own money instead of just depending on someone else to hand it to them. I don't know if they will ever understand what happened or if they will just spend the rest of their lives telling themselves that I was a horrible person who betrayed them, a mother who turned her back on them out of spite. I don't actually care anymore. I used to care what they thought about me. I used to shape my entire life around their opinions and their needs and their desires. But that time is over. I took the money that I had saved by stopping the financial support, the money that I wasn't sending to them anymore, and I spent it on myself. I traveled. I went to Italy and walked through the streets of Rome at sunrise. I went to Spain and took a cooking class in Barcelona and learned how to make paella from a woman who had been cooking for 50 years. I went to France and sat in cafes and read books and drank wine and didn't think about anyone but myself. I took cooking classes and painting classes back home. I learned things just because I wanted to learn them, not because anyone else expected me to, or because I thought I should be productive. I made friends, real friends, who weren't in my life because they expected something from me, people who called me just to check in, who invited me to things because they actually wanted me there. I went to the movies alone and didn't worry about whether someone else was having fun, or whether I was wasting money, or whether I should be home doing something more useful. I read books cover to cover without feeling guilty for not being productive, without feeling like I was neglecting someone. I slept in on weekends just because I wanted to, not because I was tired from running around doing everyone else's errands. I made myself nice meals and didn't feel like I had to apologize for spending money on food that wasn't practical or efficient or cheap. I dyed my hair a shade of red that I had always wanted to try, a deep burgundy red, and it looked ridiculous on me, but I didn't care. I wore clothes that fit me and made me feel good instead of clothes that were practical and cheap and designed to not draw attention. I went shopping and I bought things just because I liked them, not because they were on sale or because I needed them. I became a person who mattered, not just a person who made other people's lives possible, not just a person who existed to serve and give and sacrifice. See, when I look back at that folding chair, at the moment when I realized that the one place that was supposed to be reserved for me was never going to materialize, that I had paid so much for and invested so much in, and would still not be given a proper seat at the table, I think about how that single moment changed everything. That moment of clarity, when I finally saw the situation for what it was, instead of what I wanted it to be, instead of the fantasy I had been telling myself about my family's love for me. That moment was like someone turning on all the lights in a dark room at once. And once the light was on, I couldn't turn it off again. I couldn't go back to pretending that everything was fine when everything was very much not fine. I couldn't go back to accepting the crumbs of appreciation when I had given entire meals of love and sacrifice. I couldn't go back to making myself small and invisible so that other people could take up space and not feel threatened by my presence or my needs. If you have found yourself in a situation like mine, if you have found yourself giving and giving and giving until there's nothing left of you, until you've disappeared completely under the weight of other people's needs, I want you to know that you don't have to keep doing that. You don't have to keep sacrificing yourself. I want you to know that the people in your life who truly love you will not require you to disappear in order to prove your love. Real love is not conditional. Real love is not based on how much money you have or how much you're willing to sacrifice or how many times you're willing to say yes when you should be saying no. Real love looks you in the eye and it says, you matter. Your life matters. Your happiness matters just as much as mine. And if the people in your life are not saying that to you, not living like that's true, then you need to ask yourself why you're still trying so hard to make them love you. Why you're still killing yourself trying to earn love from people who should give it freely. You can't make someone value you. You can only decide that you're going to value yourself. And you can only hope that the people around you will eventually recognize that value and respect it. But if they don't, that's not your failure. That's not your fault. That's just the reality of who they are and what they're capable of. And you deserve better than that. You deserve someone who values you without you having to earn it, or prove it, or sacrifice your own life for it. So, I'm going to ask you the question that I wish someone had asked me a long time ago, when I was still young enough to have years to live for myself. What are you willing to sacrifice in order to be seen? What parts of yourself are you willing to give away in order to feel loved? And most importantly, what would happen if you just stopped? What would happen if you just decided that your life matters more than anybody else's opinion of it? What would happen if you put yourself first for once? Think about that. I'm curious to hear what you think.